emphasis is a way that you can do this. So you can emphasize key points within your text, so that's saying that, okay, I've got this text box here, I want you to read it, but if you're in a rush, if you just read these 4 words, you're still going to understand the message that I want to give you. Okay? You can do that in different ways, so you can use bolding, you can use a change of colour, or you can use slightly larger text size. Out of the 3 of them, I would say that the slightly larger text size is the least effective, because it's the least noticeable, but you can use any combination of them. But I would say that the key thing is to use them sparingly. You'll see again some examples in the next few slides where if you say, right, my conclusion is really important, which it is, so I'm going to emphasize everything in it, and it's the same as emphasizing nothing. Yeah? So use it sparingly to give you that communication that you need. Right. Another thing is white space, which should be blank space. I keep meaning to change that. White space, all I'm talking about here is having that blank canvas on the background that gives your eyes room to relax. White space, it shouldn't necessarily be white. White can be very difficult for some people to look at because the contrast between bright white and whatever colour scheme you use and whatever text you use can be really glaring. And so just using a paler pastel colour can be really more effective. But having a pale background is what I would recommend there. I had one colleague who always used to have the background of all of his posters was a picture of Bamborough Castle, which is lovely. I love castles, really nice. His research was on the estrus and reproductive cycle of rats, and there was absolutely no logic whatsoever to why, when you're reading a poster about the reproductive cycle of rats, why is there a castle in the background? 1, you're thinking more about the castle than the research. But 2, it looks super busy. There's nowhere there for your brain to be able to relax and understand and digest what it is that you want him to tell. So having that white space or blank space can be really, really effective. And another thing is alignment. So alignment is something that I'm very keen on. The way that my brain works, the way that my eyes work and everything gets processed is that if something's a couple of pixels out, I can tell. And it's like, you know, when someone, I don't even know what a modern example would be, but with the old school blackboards when people used to like run their nails down it and make that horrible screeching noise. That's what happens in my head when I see things that are not aligned. That's not what you want to be happening in anyone's head when they're reading your poster, because then they're going to be thinking about that rather than about the amazing work that you've done. And once you do get someone on that side, once someone is thinking, yeah, that's winding me up a little bit, they're going to notice every single little flaw in that poster that they wouldn't have necessarily noticed if you hadn't have just set them off on edge by having that change. Okay, so alignment is really important. And it's really easy to do. So I would recommend for all of you to make your posters in PowerPoint. It's really easy, simple piece of software to use. And in PowerPoint, all you need to do is click a couple of boxes that you want to align, and then you can click on the align button. You can say you want them aligning all to the left, all to the right, all to the middle, however you want to align them, but use that tool. It's really easy to use, and just make the most of it. Right, so how do people look at a poster? So, first thing that we do is check for visual appeal. Does it look nice? Does it look like it's going to give me a headache? If it looks like it's going to give me a headache, I'm going to walk on by and I'm not going to look at it. And then no one's going to know about the work that you've done. So you need to make sure that you're trying to make that poster look appealing. That means that it's not really busy. It means that it's not overcrowded with everything that you've done, and that it's nice and it's got that logical flow, because what you want is for it to be easy to read. Remember that you want to be able to read it from that distance in a few minutes. Yeah? So easy to read, look at your text size. You want it to have a logical flow of information so that you're not, like my husband, struggling to understand which order to read things in. Because if you don't know which order to read things in, the story that you're going to tell is going to be very different. So you want to try and make sure you've got that logical flow of information, whether you do that by using numbers, whether you use arrows. So if you've got your first box and then you say, right, here's an arrow to the next box that I want you to read, and an arrow to the next box, you could do that as an alternative. But some kind of indication in there on how you want people to read that poster. Pictures that draw attention and are memorable. So this is using pictures that are effective to communicate what you want to do. Pictures that will draw people in, not pictures that will traumatise people. So one of the posters that I was stood opposite in a poster session at a conference in London a few years ago was a dermatology conference, and when you do the poster sessions, very similar to what it's going to be like on your poster day. You've got all these posters lined up. It's quite busy. There's often there's not a lot of room. So you have all the posters in the session. People are standing there. People are milling around trying to get to different posters, and you have to stand by that poster in a conference for normally up to 2 hours. It can be very intimidating. It can be very boring. It depends how much people you get coming to see you. But you have to stand there. And the poster that was opposite me was from a person who was doing research on a dermatological condition, so a skin condition that only affects men. And I know that it only affected men because what he had was a giant picture of a diseased penis on his poster. Memorable, but not for the right reasons. I don't know anything that guy discovered. He could have discovered the cure to something, to this condition. I will never know, because all I can remember is that for 2 hours I had to stand there and look at a picture of a giant diseased penis. Yeah. And it wasn't even a diagram. I wouldn't have minded if it was a diagram. It was a photograph. There's no need for it. Don't do it. And it can be, you've got to think about the pictures that you use, because they can be quite triggering for some people. If you've got a particular disorder that you were looking at, like cancer, heart disease, anything like that, you've got to think that there might be someone in that audience who has either experienced that condition, or who's got a family member or a loved one who's experienced that condition. And if you've got a photograph of it, that can be very triggering for people. If you have a diagram, much less triggering. Okay? Now think about the effective ways that you can present it, so that you don't traumatise people like I got traumatised. For your posters, I would recommend that the things that you need to focus on, you need your introduction on there, because like I said earlier on, if you lose interest, if you don't set that foundation right at the beginning, people are going to switch off. So have your introduction on there, and have your aims, have that loud and proud what it is that you want someone to understand. Yeah.
In terms of figures, do you present your figures like you did in your project, or do you put the figures down like publications or that you've compared?
So I would put, for your results, definitely that needs to be your figures. So that needs to be the graphs from the data that you generated. You can put other figures in introductions, for example, if you wanted to highlight like the background of what you were looking at, you could put a figure in there. But the figures for your results definitely need to be your data figures. Yep. Also, things that you want to focus on is your conclusions. Conclusions are going to be the last thing that your assessor reads. Have it punchy, have a really clear message that you've taken away from it. Don't have a paragraph this long that says, I conclude from this, and then maybe this, and then maybe this. That's not a lasting message that you want anyone to take home from you. Nice and punchy. This is what we found, this is what it means. Yeah, that's all you need in there. And your figures as well. Your figures are your data figures, that's what's going to draw people in to look at what you've done. So think about how you can present them in an appealing way. The other thing for any of you who go on to do conferences is whether or not a person is present in front of that poster. So I mentioned just now when I was talking about the use of figures, that when you're at a poster session, often you'll have to stand there for up to 2 hours. And some people will only look at your poster if you're stood there. And that's because what they want you to do is to tell them about your poster so that they don't have to read it. Again, it's that immediacy, that wanting to consume everything quickly. So they'll only come and look at your poster if you're stood there. that's kind of what it's going to be like in your assessment. You're going to have to be stood there because your assessors need to speak to you, okay? But sometimes in conferences you'll get other people who don't find it comfortable to just go up and talk to a stranger. I'm one of them. I find it quite nerve-wracking. I'd much rather look at a poster if someone wasn't there because I don't want them to speak to me. And you'll get it at conferences as well where someone will come up and they'll come up to you and they'll come up to your poster and they'll completely avoid looking at you as much as they can. And it's always good practice then. You just say, oh, thanks for coming to see my poster. If you've got any questions, let me know. I'm just here, but otherwise feel free to read it. And then leave them alone. And sometimes they'll come up, they'll just take a picture with their iPad and move on. Whatever happens at a conference like that, it's not a reflection on the quality of your work. It's just different people look at things in different ways, and you just got to accept that and not feel intimidated by it. There's going to be a point at every person who's at a conference, there's a point in every poster session where you look around and you think everyone's got someone talking to them apart from me. That means that my poster must be rubbish. And that's not the case at all. It's just the ebb and flow of people moving around and the different ways that people like to look at things. So when you are at a conference, just don't feel intimidated by that. Embrace that differences that you see around you. Right, types of questions that you get asked. So you're going to get asked questions when you present your poster. And the most common question that you get in conferences or anywhere is, talk me through your poster. And again, this is that whole thing of, I've seen your poster, it's drawn me in, I don't want to bother reading it, tell me about it. Because it's easier for me to hear it without having to look at it. So it's important that you can talk through your poster. But when I say talk through your poster, that doesn't mean read your poster. Okay? It doesn't mean that when someone comes up to you and says, oh, can you talk me through your poster, and then you turn to your screen, and then you just read it line for line for line for line. You've all, I would bet, been in lectures or talks where that's exactly what the person has done. They've turned to the screen, they've read it word for word, and you think, why am I here? Yeah? So the whole point of talking through your poster and having that spiel is that you can pull out those key points and you can point to them on the poster, but you're not reading from the poster. So you can talk about your introduction, you don't need to look at your poster for that. Oh, we'll have to look at the mark scheme, which is what the second hour is for. But you talk through your introduction, you can talk about your aims, keep it punchy, keep it quick. You don't need to read everything that's on there. And then, when you're talking about your results, point to the results that you're talking about so that people can see where you've got that information from. And then talk about your final conclusion. So when you do your assessment, you are going to have to talk through your poster. Prepare it. Yeah, I think the maximum time you've got for it is 5 minutes. 5 minutes will go really, really quick. Yeah. So you need to focus on those key points, keeping that story nice and simple. Can you explain to me what the take-home message is? This is again really, really common, and it's very linked with the next one, which is what's their overall conclusion. So this is just an opportunity for you then to take your conclusion statement on your poster, which should be quite short anyway, and expand on why you believe that. Yeah, so that's a way that you can talk around it. Please explain this section to me in more detail. This might be if someone's read your poster and they're a little bit confused about one section, they want to know more about it. Talk me through it in more detail. That doesn't mean you've done it wrong, you've not shown me enough of it. It means I'm interested in this. Tell me a little bit more. Because the thing when you make this poster, you're the expert in what you've done. You're the one who did that research. You know exactly what your data means. You know exactly what data you got. You know what you went through to have to do it, particularly if you did Western blotting. You know what it is that you've done. You know what it means. You know how hard you worked to get it. So show it off. And I think that's linked with this one as well, which is my favourite one. When someone says that I don't agree with what you show here. And this is an opportunity. You either crumble or you get your ego on. And I would recommend you all get your ego on. You've done that work. You've made those conclusions for a a reason. Yeah? Believe in that reason. It might be that the person who disagrees with you, they're coming at it from a totally different perspective. And that's fine. Everyone's going to come at things from different perspectives. So you listen to their reason. You say, that's a really interesting point. Thank you for, for opening my eyes to that perspective. However, this is why I believe what I believe. And you do it because you put that on there for a reason. You've not put that on there because you think, oh, I don't know what's happening, I'm going to guess. You put that on there because that's what you've come to, because you've done that work. So own it. Use it as an opportunity to show off. And don't see it as a negative thing. It's an opportunity to open debate, which is a really good skill to have in university work. So make sure that you own it, that you believe in what you've done. Because if you don't believe it, who is? Your readers are not going to. Right, so summary of what makes a good poster. Things that you want to ask yourself, what is the story that you want to tell? How can you make that really easy to understand and in a logical order? Is your take-home message clear? Does that conclusion stand out, and is it punchy? Is it short? Is it quick? Does your poster look good, or does it look like it's going to give someone a headache? And what can you expand upon in your talk and your answers to questions? And also think about who your audience is. The thing that underpins all of that is who your audience is, because that whole thing about telling the story and how you can set that foundation depends on who your audience is. So if you're making a poster for the general public, the way that you present that, the things that you put on your poster, the images that you use, the text that you use, is going to be very different to if you're at a subject specialist conference. Because the level of background knowledge is going to be different. If you think about your audience that you're going to have for your posters in this project, then who is your audience going to be? Academics, yeah.
Potentially from different fields, not the same one.
Absolutely,
They
yeah.
want to know what you know.
Yeah. And that's the key thing.
Because they're not in the same background, what you produce, they want to potentially know how it impacts maybe their
Yeah.
life, how it could relate.
Yeah. So it's that little bit of a wider perspective. Yeah. Who else is your audience? Who else is going to be there on the day? There again? Yeah, students. You're all going to be there. And you're free to go up and ask questions to your peers as well and learn more about what they did. Yeah. And the other people who are going to be there, there's going to be reps there from companies as well. So it could be an opportunity to impress a future employer. But pretty much everyone who's going to be there is going to have a scientific background, which means that you're not pitching at the level of the general public. Yeah? So you can assume some degree of knowledge there. But we've got such a diverse range of fields. So me, I class myself as a cell biologist or a biochemist. Microbiology, the last time I did anything to do with microbiology was when I was an undergraduate in 1999, which might be before some of you were born. Yeah. So I don't know much about microbiology. So think about how, if you did a microbiology project, how would I be able to understand it? Set that scene in that background. Don't go diving straight in and losing people at the beginning. Yeah. All right. Have we got any questions? No? All happy? All excited? Looking forward to making posters. I love making posters as well. Right. Your assessment. We're going to go over this more in the second hour. Your assessment, your poster needs to be A1, and it needs to be landscape. Okay? In previous years we've offered options of portrait or landscape. Landscape I think is a really good choice, and you'll see why in the next few slides. The things that you need to have on there, you need to have your introduction, you need to have your methods, your results, your conclusions, you need to have selected references, and you need to have your acknowledgements. And you need to have a maximum of a 5-minute pitch. This is your 5-minute talking your reader through the poster. So we don't have to ask you to do that, you have to do that anyway. Okay? And that's what you need in your assessment. We're going to go through the rubric a lot more in the second hour, but just briefly, poster layout and design. So how does it look? Does it give me a headache? That would give you 20% of your mark. Okay? So it's quite important that you put consideration into that. Content selection. Have you chosen the most important things to tell your story? Or have you thrown everything out? Have you done the poster equivalent of just throwing up all your ideas on a page? That's probably what your first draft will look like. That's certainly what my first draft of anything looks like. It's the same with writing. I always call it as like vomit on a page. It's just everything that's in my head. And it's a mess. And then you need to tidy it up. Okay, so think about your content selection. How you put in the key things in there that you need to have. Have you got loads of stuff in there that you don't need that just complicate everything? You got 30% for that. 30% is for your presentation, so this is your spiel. This is how you're going to talk through that poster. Is it clear? Is it logical? Is it within time? After 5 minutes, when we stop you at 5 minutes, have you only just got to your methods? And then your responses to questions. So you're going to have 5 minutes to talk through the poster, 5 minutes for us to ask you questions. There can be questions on anything on your poster. It could be that talk me through this section in more detail. Could be explain to me how you've concluded this from that graph there. Those kind of questions. So you need to be able to answer them.
But don't you say, how did you conclude this and like right there? If you're going to rephrase the whole graph,
So if you've made a conclusion, if you've said that, I don't know, if you've said that treating these cells with this compound is going to have this outcome for cancer, how have you got that from the data that you've presented?
we just an example why is it not so much as why you think that? Is it more like
Yeah.
can you say why you think that? What your opinion is?
Yeah, but your opinion has to be grounded in the facts of what you've presented in your data.
If you
Yeah.
do that, is that?
Yeah. And that's another point as well. If someone asks you a question and you don't quite get what that question means, ask for clarification.
You can ask for rephrasing.
You can certainly ask for rephrasing, and I would encourage you to do so,
Yeah.
because that's, you know, if you can't, if the question's not phrased in a way that's easily understandable, that's not what we're assessing you on. So if you don't quite understand what it is that we're getting at, just ask for that extra clarification, and then academics will be happy to do that for you. Don't use that as an excuse to try and wind down your 5-minute timer for questions. You know, so don't just say, oh, I don't quite understand how, can you rephrase that? No, can you rephrase it again? Can you rephrase it again? Don't do that.
There is no limit for the questions.
Is there
It's
not?
approx 5 minutes, but for
Ooh.
that, there is no limit. for the
Excellent.
questions.
Normally I do go around with the time, because otherwise I'll get
It's
carried
not
away and ask you
expected
loads.
to go beyond 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But there is no hard limit.
Yeah, yeah. Right, so that's where your marks are coming from, but we'll talk more about that in the afternoon session. But, not afternoon, sorry, in the second hour, but check your rubric, it is on Canvas. Always check your rubrics for every assignment that you do. When you're writing your project reports, which I know you guys are doing now, look at the rubrics. Work to the rubrics, please, because that's what we're marking it up. Right. So, what we're going to do now is a few examples from my long, interesting history with making posters. So, I've presented, I would say, over 50 posters. I've been on probably at least twice as many of that through the work that I've done with other people. I've had a long time to make all the mistakes. Yeah. So what I want to do now is give you some examples of those mistakes so that you don't make them. It's all well and good just to look at a load of text in a lecture like we've just had now. You're not going to learn it unless you see what it could look like, which in some cases is horrible. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put some posters up, and I want you guys to tell me what's wrong with them. Okay? You gonna tell me? Yeah? These are all posters that my name is on. I've got very thick skin. You have to do research for as long as we've done, because there's no way that you can be harsher than other people that I've seen. Yeah? Sometimes sometimes people can be very mean. So what I want you to do to learn from this properly, don't be nice. Look at it, say what's wrong with it, so that you don't make those same mistakes. Okay? Right. There we go. That's poster number 1. What do we think of that? You want to read that in a conference?
I can't read it and there's too much.
There's too much. Yeah, far too much going on. Yeah.
Many either there, probably got this next one, and I probably need to have the methods on the right hand side.
Yeah.
These are the results on the bottom.
Yep. But it's the order. Which order do you read that in? Yeah. Because I think the thing with this that I find really interesting, because I read in rows. So why have I made a poster that's in columns? If I saw that at a conference, I'd probably read it the wrong way. It's my own word.
Some figures are actually condensed in references, but there is this really, that figure there, figure 1, that doesn't have textual commentary.
That one, yeah.
There has to be like a little tiny bit of textual commentary.
Yeah. And also, a little flowchart there. How dull is it? It's probably the dullest way that I could have possibly presented that. Yeah? So this gives you an idea to start to try and think about how you can make things more interesting. Yeah? I made this poster. This was the first poster I made during my PhD. So I started my PhD in October, and this poster was in January. So with inductions and everything like that, I probably had about a month in the lab, which is how much time you guys had.
5 days for science.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit more biochem with this one. But yeah, so this is the same amount of time that you had, and look what a dull poster I made from it. Don't make that dull poster. I think some of the other things that I would say for this, right, look at the text. Look at how close it is to the borders of those boxes. Yeah, you see how crowded that is. There's not that space that gives your brain the time to think. So that's not a good thing. There's too much text as a whole. Makes a bonkers
I think
amount of
like
text.
maybe 2 to 3 lines is sufficient.
Probably more than 2 or 3 lines. But less than that.
You're allowed to do that, because maybe
Yeah, but just think about how you want to read it. You know, I mean, it's been interesting, like when I've been looking recently, because we had some work that we did got taken up by the press. So I was looking at the press releases for that only last week. And the way that they do the paragraphs now when you read the news online, they're really, really short. It's just like 1 or 2 sentences, and then you've got a gap. And a paragraph break, and then 1 or 2 sentences. And I think that's a lot more how we're reading now. So if you get confronted with a giant wall of text like that, you're not going to read it, you're going to check out. Because it just looks so dull. The other things as well that I would say with this, for where I say if you got the most key points there, you look at this figure up here at the top, where the arrow is. So this is a zymogram. It's like it looks at protein levels. But the most important thing, the only important thing on there is these white bands. So why have I got all of this black space above and below it? Crop it down. You don't need it. And black space is a lot more noisy for your brain than paler space and white space. So just cut that down and instead have more of the background around it, just to make it easier for your eyes to see, and it'll focus your eyes more in on those bands that you want people to be looking at. The other things I would say is this graph, don't do 3D graphs, they don't look good. That was me getting excited of using Excel for the first time and seeing I could make a 3D graph. No one else was excited by it. It's not an attractive way of making a graph, so don't use things that you don't need. Other things, conclusions. Is that punchy? Is that clear what my take-home message is? It just says, I'm not quite sure, let me give you a paragraph so I can tell you as many different arguments as I can. So it's not a good example. I'm going to have another one now, which is that one. I love the size. And then tell me about that one. What's wrong with that one?
I can't see the text.
Say that again?
Can't see the text.
Can't see the text? Yep. Anything else?
The graphs are not.
Method one, how it should be presented.
I'm amazed that no one has yet mentioned the colour.
Unless you
Right.
The colour on this, the colour scheme on this is horrendous. You know when I've talked about how you need to make your posters so that they're visually appealing. Hot pink and mint green are not an appealing combination in the slightest. The reason that they are those colours is because my supervisor hated pink. I'd had an argument with my supervisor and I thought, oh, how can I wind her up? I know, I'll make a hot pink poster which I then presented at a national conference. Don't be doing that, don't be petty. Because I look at that now, I'm so embarrassed that I have to stand by that. When it was hot pink. It was even brighter when it got printed out as well, it was horrendous. So colour scheme is important, yeah? I mean the green, that's awful combination of colours because they clash. They don't make it so that you want to read that data, they don't make you want to do any of that, they just make you go, oh, and walk on. Yeah, so think about your visual appeal. The other things I think with this one is now we've got these curly boxes. What's people's thoughts on curly boxes? You hate them? Yeah, anyone else?
They're not professional.
Not professional, interesting. So curvy boxes
Doesn't stand out.
to stand out. But they're a love-hate kind of thing. They're kind of like a Marmite thing. And I've experimented with them sometimes, other times not. I don't really have a massive opinion on them. But what I would say is that if you do curvy boxes, because it can be easier on the eyes, it can make it so that it's not quite as angular and aggressive on the visuals. What you can do on PowerPoint now, which you couldn't do in the past, is you can control the size of that curve. So in the past, the size of the curve was always proportional to the box size. So you can see on the box that's above it, the curve is a lot bigger. What you can do now is you can make it so that those curves are uniform, which if you do use it, can make it a bit easier on the eye. Yeah. And it also can give you more space, because you can see how with the curves it can really constrict on what you can actually put in there. So if you do use them, I would recommend making them small and making them uniform across all your boxes. Other thing for both of these posters, and I still don't understand why I did them this way, the headings, why are they over at the end? Put them in the middle, so that then it stands out and you can read them more, which gives you more of an idea of how to go about them. Also means you don't run into the problems of the curvy corners. Yeah. So, different things there. Right, what about this one? What are our thoughts on that one? Better? Better. See what a difference landscape makes?
Yeah.
Yeah. What other thoughts have we got on that?
The figures look well presented.
Yeah, the figures look better presented.
Yeah.
They're not mint green. It's a good start. So this, you see the little flow diagram there? That,
Also the layout as well. I think the backgrounds in the section actually makes a difference. So when you put it on the light, it makes it more readable.
yeah. But the flow diagram there is the same as this one. Exactly the same. Much more visually appealing on that second one. Other things with this one, when we're starting to talk about those kind of subliminal messages that you want to send. So the colours for the graphs match with the colours on the flow diagram. So the blue graphs are related to the blue ones that are at the bottom there. You've got the pink graphs are related to the pink curing. So it's just giving those little messages that people don't realise that you're giving them, but that can make a difference in the understandability of it. I would still say conclusions is far too big. Methods is far too big. There's no reason why my headers are not centered. So there's still room for improvement, but you can see how it is moving in a better direction. Let's have some more negotiations on. What about this one? Too much going on. Why is there too much going on?
There's a lot of text.
There's a lot of text. Yeah.
And then you have a number there, so I don't know what I'm reading.
Yeah. So this was a medical student of mine who made this. I don't like this poster. I didn't see it before I printed it. Which is it. But far too busy. One of the reasons that it looks really busy, look at these boxes in the middle. Right. All of them are a different size, width-wise. Yeah. Why? Why is that happening? It just subliminally makes it much more noisy for your brain because it's not aligned. It's not uniform. Got any other thoughts on that one? So this one, we've got a figure which is okay for this conference. This was presented at a surgical conference, but I wouldn't present that somewhere else.
There are 4 research boxes.
There are 4 research boxes. Results. Yeah, which order do you read them in? No? So I can see from where he's written his figure legends, it wants that one, that one, that one, and that one. But you have to really look at it to be able to figure that out, and you shouldn't have to put that effort in. Any other thoughts on this?
Why is there like 4 boxes for results?
Yeah, why is there 4 boxes for results?
When it could be only one.
Who knows? Who knows? I think the other things that I would point to with this is too much text, conclusion is massive, methods are massive. No one likes methods sections, they're dull. Think about the minimum amount that you need to put on there, because you can expand on that in your talk. Yeah? If you're with the figures, like why are these arrows here so huge?
You don't even use it.
No.
You just place them.
Place it underneath. It'll be fine. There's far too much going on. And then you add the colour scheme on top of that. And you just automatically think, nah, I'm going to switch off from this, I don't like it. Right. What about that one? I love that face that I just saw up there. What about this one? What's our thoughts on this?
It's too red, purple.
Say that again. I'm very deaf, you need to shout.
It's too purple. Too bright.
Yeah, the colour scheme of it is not
Can't really read any.
ideal. Can't read much of it. I totally agree. What else do we think?
You don't know where to start and then
I think because of the really dark background, and then the contrast between the dark background, the white boxes, the sharp corners, the busyness of it, it feels quite aggressive.
Oh, it doesn't have methods and materials.
It does. They're up here.
Oh, no, no.
But then where's the numbering? How would you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, you lose it. And having these kind of columns that are so thin are really hard to read. Yeah. And the other thing as well is we've got results here, but we've also got the results in all of the figures. So that's just duplication of text. And this is so busy, there's no need to have a duplication of text. That would be a really easy way to cut that text down and make it so that you could have, try and find a way to make it less aggressive on your eyes. And I think the counter to it, so this is a similar poster. This is when we started getting told what our colour schemes have to be and you didn't have freedom. But you look at the difference, that one's still got far too much text on it, but the difference between the darker background and the lighter background, your eyes automatically go to the lighter one because it's easier for your brain to process. So that's kind of, I've put those on there to show you that impact that the background can have. This one we've started to get some numbering on there now, so you know which order to read the results in. But there's still too much text. looks easier on the eye somehow. And I think part of that reason might be because there's no boxes. Yeah? The boxes are inferred by the header, but there's no boxy lines. So that could be one of the reasons why it looks a little bit less busy. This was another medical student who did this one. And he did a good job of it as well. I think it's quite nice. I think with this, particularly if you look at this one, you know where we talked about the results, where you've got all the results here. You've got a massive wall of text here for these results, same here, same here. If you look at this, it's really cut that down. Yeah, so it's cut that down to what the key points are, which is a lot more powerful, I would say. Things that could have been done differently. If you look at this here in the methods, you know I've said that the methods, nobody likes the methods. Because nobody does. Unless your project was designing a method. But for this, it's got all the methods, it's got the text, and then it's got the figure. Just use the figure. Yeah? Why do you need both? That figure tells exactly what he's done. And I'd much rather look at that than read that. Yeah? So that's using different ways of doing it. I think with this graph here, I think is too busy. If you look at that graph, there's only two parts of it which are significant, which are the key parts of that data. So focus on those ones rather than putting everything in. If you did that, it'd make them a lot clearer and it'd make it stand out, because at the minute you have to look at that for a few seconds before you realise actually there's some significant data on there.
You use the expression of that's a protein.
It is a protein.
So, I mean, you could have. What about Western block? Do you not think Western block would be a good one?
So that would be a question that you could have asked.
Yeah, like.
Yeah. So that would be a valid question to ask. Is like, okay, you've done that using qPCR.
Yeah, but it's like,
What about the Western blot?
Because the papers I've read, they've actually used Western block to measure the expression of protein.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how Western block.
Well, that would be a question that you could have asked him. Yeah. What about the colour scheme? No. Why? Not cohesive. There's a lot of different colours going on. Let's move on to another one. Right, I think we've got the really bad one now. How about this one? That is the face that I pulled when I saw this poster for the first time at a conference with my name on it when I've not seen it before. I was not happy. Can you imagine why? What's wrong with this one? Say that again?
I have seen this paper before.
Yeah. So you know what's coming next. What's wrong with this one?
The green is so ugly.
Choice of colour? Yep.
The boxes are different.
The boxes are different, yeah, so there's a combination of square angles and curvy sides, yeah? They're not aligned, they're so badly aligned. And it just upsets me every time I look at it. You'd think I'd have got past it by now, because this is like 8 years old, but I haven't. Yeah. It doesn't look like you'd want to go and read it. And I mean, the title is a fine balance with titles. That title is so tiny, it kind of disappears. Yeah? You don't want your title to take up like a third of the poster, which I've seen before, don't do that. But you also don't want it to disappear and be that small that you kind of don't see it. I think the figure up here isn't tied in very well. These just don't get me started on them. There's nice data in there as well, that's the frustrating thing. There's really nice data in there. And it's got lost in this. Right, should we put the worst one up? Yeah, do you want to read that? You read that from in 5 minutes from 5 feet away? So what do you think's wrong with this one? Text, too much text. Far too much text in it, it's far too small. Yep. So it shows you how important that text size is, because that's what it looks like. remember I mentioned about tables? Do you think everything in that table is crucial for you to understand the take-home message of this poster? No. No. So think about the data that you put in. This is an example of that where it's just, I've done all this stuff, I want to show everyone how much stuff I've done, but then you lose the whole point to it. The other things with this in terms of logic is this here, this box here, is the key for this graph. It's not even in the same box. That's not going to help anyone with understanding it. The methods, I mean, this table's in the methods. I'm going to be honest, and I don't even know what that table is. I should have looked. But yeah, that's all methods. Aims and objectives. Yeah, aims and objectives, you just need 1 or 2 bullet points that are really punchy on what your aims and objectives are. And that's got a whole wall of text. The discussion, on the converse, the discussion is this. So the balance of text, the balance of where the emphasis is all off on this poster. And as well here you've got reasons for caution, which says after you've spent 20 minutes reading my essay, here's why you shouldn't really believe much of what I've written. Don't do that, it upsets people. You can always talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your study. Every study has strengths and weaknesses. Every single one does. And that's not a negative thing. And being able to recognise those is actually a really good thing. But that's something that you can talk about when you talk through that poster. Yeah?
And if this poster's on our project, our references, we're not going to include every single reference we use in our project, are we?
No, so keep your references. You want to be selective with the references that you use.
You can choose what you want to post. You can decide what you want.
Yeah, so for the references, I would say that the only place that you're going to use references mainly is going to be in your introduction to set that scene.
And everything else is what we've already written, just in picture form.
So you wouldn't need to have any references in your methods. You wouldn't have any in your results because that's your results, so that there isn't a reference that's related to it. You could technically put some in your conclusions, but I don't tend to put them in the conclusions either because you put in what your conclusion from your data is, so you don't necessarily need references there either. Your background you do.
If you followed a method online.
So you could put that in your methods section, but the way that you can do your methods, I think we're going to talk about that in the second session, is you do it really, really briefly. So like with the,
I have an example.
yeah, okay, well, we'll go through the example after the
Like,
break.
do not get confused between references in your project report, which is the Harvard style, it's the full format, everything needs to be referenced, it will be references across the project report, mainly in the introduction and the discussion, and the poster. The poster is different. We'll show an example of the reference format for the poster in a moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different. Here, 1, 2, 3 references, if needed for the background information, the introduction points, that's as much as we need.
Right, and we're going to finish with this one. Bit easier to look at than the last one, yes? Yeah. And here we've got the numbering, which helps. You look at now how brief the actual results are. The bigger legends, they're really, really brief. So that's, I think this is a much better example. Again, still room for improvement, because I think that, the references here, too much. I've used the wrong style of reference in there. Don't need to have that. It would have been better that I could have had that space to just make those boxes a little bit further apart and things like that. But it is a lot easier to read, and it gives you those things. Okay. Right, I'm going to finish there just with that summary again of what makes a good poster. Think about the story you want to tell. Think about what you need on there to be able to tell that story, and not that it looks like you've thrown up on a poster of all of your ideas. What's your take-home message? Does it look good? Is it hot pink? If it is, start again. And then then what can you expand upon in your talk to and your answers to questions? Right, are you going to put the QR code up? There you go. Well, I think with your poster assessment, I think it is, I love it. It's a really, really good day because it's the last thing that you do as part of your degree. You're all in there together, and it really is a big showcase and a celebration of what you've done. And I think we've been doing it for 2 years now.
Yeah, this year will be the 3rd edition.
And it's really, it is absolutely amazing. So, see it as an opportunity to go out on a hike.
Not all
Yeah.
the changes are next year. We already did changes before. That's for a comment that I received yesterday.
Okay.
About you are always improving for the following students.
No, this was, because we brought this in before 3 years, third year, yeah, because it does give you that kind of end of journey event. Rather than you just finish it by doing an assessment, like an exam or an essay, and you're just like, yeah, I just want to leave now. I don't want to think about it ever again. It gives you that really good experience right at the very end, and it's good for us as academics. I love watching it. Yeah.
There are some things that Dr. Richard Suman has mentioned about the poster that apply for the project report that you're doing. So this concept of telling a story, think about that when you're writing your project report. I think that a very common mistake that happens is that you're doing your introduction and you are already talking about your results or answering the questions that your project is going to answer, so avoid that. You're telling a story and telling us in the introduction what is known about the topic and what is not known, and therefore you are going to further study. So just make sure that your introduction does not does a spoiler of what's going to come after. And also, I was making some notes about how to present your data. This trying to choose the best way to present the data in the poster. Again, that applies for your project report. The graphs, figures that you are going to show in your project report are the best way in which you can present your data, and you can discuss that with your supervisor during these weeks, and you will also get feedback on your results and discussion draft. So think about that, the best way to present your data for your project report, and that will, if that's already been chosen correctly, that will be potentially the same figure that you will use in your poster. It might be that you decide to do a shorter version, like removing the black space that we've seen in a poster before, or it could be that in a graph you remove those columns that don't provide additional information, so that the graph is easier to follow. Limitations. It's true that the limitations of your study, or the cautions, I think it was called cautions then, that is not needed in the poster, but it's very important in your discussion that you make clear that you know that you may have concluded that with the limited amount of data that you have, but that you understand that there is a limitation of what you can conclude from your study. So that's important for your project report, that you understand the limitations of your study. Trying to think about what other things I put. And the questions that you get, because this is a question that get every year, like, what questions are there? I don't give guidance to the markers about what questions to ask. The ones that we put here, Dr. Gisman has summarized, are key ones, general ones, but what is going to dictate the questions is mostly your presentation. So if you are saying something for a fact that the marker thinks is not a fact, definitely they will ask about that. So if you are presenting something that they feel it's not well explained, or might be the wrong conclusion, you're already leading them to ask you that. And I'm not saying that you present wrong information, because that will mark it down for your presentation. The presentation is 30 points and the question is 20. But what I'm saying is like it depends on your poster and your presentation, the type of questions that you are getting. So, I'm going to go very soon into the presentation. All this is because it's still loading all the information. So I wanna keep giving you information. But something else that we want you to do today is to give us information for a project that myself, Dr. Richard Suman, and Dr. Kosa are leading. That's a research project, so you are doing research projects, we are doing research projects too. Several at different points. And one of them is a pedagogical research project to try to find out if the generation of open educational resources by students, how effective they are for future students. So I pointed out at some point during the year the videos that are available on Canvas, and you can watch. Those are videos that last year students generated that were enrolled in an extracurricular activity done by the university. So this year we have a new cohort of students doing this, so next year the library of resources will be larger. So we would really love if you could scan this QR code and answer a questionnaire. You need to log into your University of Bradford account. You can only answer the questionnaire once. So if you don't mind scanning and starting the questionnaire, that would be lovely. I can give you 5 minutes to do so, and then we can start, or I can carry on and trust that you will complete it after, if you don't mind. Which one do you prefer? I give you 5 minutes of silence. questionnaire,
Yeah.
thank you. If you haven't finished, or if you want to do it, I will probably do a final campus announcement before we close it. It is anonymous. We do not record your name. You just need to log in because only the people that are enrolled in this module are allowed to answer it, and that's so that we can, when we publish the results, if we publish them, we can justify that we didn't fake any data. Only people that were enrolled in the module could answer it. So, what I'm going to cover in this session, I'll try not to repeat too much about things that have already been said, so that we have more time to mark posters that were submitted by students in the past 3 years. But I want you to think about this, about assessment literacy. Basically, that's your ability to understand the purpose and processes of the assessments. So basically, it's how well you understand these questions here, and I'm going to answer them for this particular assessment. We had a similar session with assessment 1 and assessment 3 in the first semester. So the learning outcomes that are assessed by this assessment are 6 and 7. You can find them in the module handbook, which is on Canvas. How it will be assessed, it's the poster you design, the 5-minute presentation you deliver, and the answer that you provide to the questions that the markers do. Why we do it this way? It's because we define this as an authentic assessment, because we are mirroring what, if you end up doing research, you'll be doing in a workplace, in a research environment. So that's why we designed this. We created this conference that we are running in Richmond Atrium, in which you will be doing exactly the same that you will be doing in a research conference. If you become a researcher, if you become a PhD student, and then go into academia or into a research institution. So how you are going to be marked, it will be by 2 academics that have not been involved at any point in marking you in this module before. The reason why we've introduced this way is because this is going to happen in May, and what happened 2 years ago is that some of the supervisors were away on that day, and then I had to make a decision like, okay, so some supervisors could mark their own students, some couldn't. That's not fair. So the only way to make it fair is that nobody who has seen your project report at any point will be marking your poster. And that's about your audience, knowing your audience, and knowing that they won't be specialists on your particular topic. But that's great, because they will have a great understanding of biomedical science, they will have a great scientific understanding, but not specialists on your topic. And that will be exactly the same for everybody. What your grades mean, rubrics. The rubrics will say what you're expected to do, so please do read them. I handed the description for the first 2 criteria, which are the 2 that we can use today, because we don't have a student from last year presenting the poster. But we have another session in week 9 with Catherine McElroy and myself. We are going to talk about presentation skills and networking skills. What I would hope is that some of you that day decide to deliver that 5-minute speech. That will give you a lot of advantage, because you will be ready, and yes, you might not have your poster ready in week 9, but you will have written the abstract for your project report, so you could practice with the abstract, okay? And if you volunteer for that, that would be great. If not, we'll see what we do with the second part of that session, okay? But I'll make a Canvas announcement, try to get you to volunteer for that. So feedback on this is done today by understanding how to make a poster, by scoring the posters from past students, and those in that session in week 9 where we'll talk more about presentation skills. My experience from these 2 past years is that I was expecting people to do much better in the post assessment that they have done. It's not that they have done bad, it's that they have done the same as with the project report. And I was assuming that they would do a lot better than in expecting 5 to 10 marks higher than the project report. Because by that time, you are an expert when you're making the poster. And what I notice is that the key issue is not practicing the 5 minutes speech. I think it's the 5 minutes speech what really is moving you down. So really, I mean, the mark is going to you, and you are going to start a 5 minutes speech and you being blank like, oh, I don't know what to say. You need to memorize that 5 minutes. And memorize doesn't mean memorize word by word, but exactly what you want to say, okay? So please work on that. So, that's the deadline for the poster. It's in week 12, which is 1 week later than last year. That's the 10th of April. There is no possible extension, which is different to the project report. So if you want to apply for an extension for the project report, please read my Canvas announcement from yesterday. Okay? For the project report, you are allowed to apply for an extension, and you just need to state a valid reason, and there is no requirement for evidence. And I'm going to leave it there. AI cannot be.
On the AI thing,
Yes.
are we allowed to use AI for generative images?
No. Your images need to be your own images. This is we might change this in the future, I don't know. But as for this year, AI cannot be used for the poster. Full stop. Those are the sections. I'm not going to go in there. But out of all of these, which one is the key one? The results. Okay? So the key one is the results. But don't forget about the other ones. That's why I put here brief, conclusions. I didn't put brief because conclusions always are brief. Key selected references, brief acknowledgements. The reason for putting your email is because we got companies coming on that day, and if they want to reach you out, that's the way that they can reach you out. So that's what we are asking for your email. One at a time.
Okay, so why UoB email? We should use our personal one because after
If you want to put your personal one, that's great. Yeah, that's not a requirement, that's fine.
So acknowledgement is visible by Zoom.
Acknowledgements are, I think they look nice, but they are not mandatory. There is no rubric for acknowledgement. There's no, yeah. So landscape this year, okay, only landscape. The reason for this is because I am still trying to get approval for the printing of all the posters, but that has not been granted. I am feeling positive, but it's not granted. So I need you to do landscape in case we need to go with screens. Okay.
Do we print it out?
No.
We just submit it on Canvas.
Yeah. So if they are printed, they will be printed by us free of charge to you. If they are not printed, they won't be printed for anybody. Again, this is just to be fair, because I know they don't cost a lot of money individually, but it won't be fair to expect some people may not be able to print it by themselves.
So that means, what size is an A1 paper? I've never seen that.
That's the sizes there, so it's 84.1 centimeters width and 59 centimeters high. So I would say something like that, roughly. Question?
And if they aren't printed, how would we then present it? Is it based off of
So the alternative will be having probably 10 to 12 portable screens in the atrium, but I'm still hoping that we don't go that way. But I just need to be honest with you. So at this point, I was hoping to get an answer by this point, but I'm still fighting for that money.
So if they're printed, do you physically bring them or
No.
are they there?
No, that's why the deadline is where it is, because we need that time to send them to be printed, for them to be printed, for me to double check, because these past 2 years there is always an issue. And we display them on the day. So you just basically are told a number, and then you know where your poster is located. Tammy first.
assuming if they are printed, we do get to keep them.
Yes, you can keep them.
Oh.
Yes, yes. But my office is full of last year students that decide not to collect them. Usually it's depending on how happy you are with your poster, you are more likely to take them out or not. Laura?
If there is some control with, for example, the quality of the content, can we resend it or is it going to be
No. And this year, something that we are also asking this year is that all the submissions can only be made as PDFs. And the system will not accept, the Canvas box will not accept anything that is not in a PDF format, so that you can save it as a PDF and then you know the quality, because that's what the company will be printing.
So that means that so for example, if it's on a PowerPoint, I have to print it as a PDF first. So that I
Yes,
can have it.
and then you submit that. Yeah. Okay, so quickly, PowerPoint, I think most people are going to use PowerPoint. Design, slide size, custom slide size, and then you set up for the correct width and height for, this is on Canvas, Megan, don't worry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just wanted to ask if we do use any images that aren't strictly our own reference.
If there are images that are not yours, yes, you need to reference them, and that will be for the introduction mainly, you know. But yeah, so PDF must be PDF. Again, I will make reminders of this later on. If this changes and we accept PowerPoint, I will make an announcement. But as the Canvas box is set up now, only accepts PDFs. That's what we were talking about, the references. So this is an example. So that comes from one of Dr. Richardson's papers. So that will be your sentence in your introduction. At the end, instead of putting the Harvard format, you just put a number, 1. That will be your text. And this is how it will look in the reference list. So 1, the author, year, and the shorter version of the journal. So this takes a lot less space, because here you're not putting Riches et al. And the year, it's just 1. And here in the reference list, it's much shorter than putting all the authors, etc. So again, this is both on this slide and on the Canvas box for the poster, so you can revisit that. So, 2 things. 1, it's a celebration event, and I want you to enjoy it. The feedback that we got from the students in these past 2 years has been excellent, so I'm not expecting something different, okay? I'm expecting you to love it. We schedule it on the final day of the 2 weeks of exams, so that any of you who is doing a diagnostics exam will already done it. But also, because now the year 1 students present their group poster on that day, and the year 2s are invited. You were invited last year. I think only a very few of you are turned up, but never mind. So we ensure that year 2s also don't have an exam on that day, so that it really becomes a celebration end of degree event in which you can showcase your results. You are more than welcome to ask family or friends to come along. The atrium is an open space, so they can come and you can show off your results, okay? So you can get a picture alongside that. So think it as an event in which you're celebrating your end of degree. And I know that several of you will have some exams later in the summer, but it's not the same, okay? It's not the same as an exam. It's going to be our 3rd edition, so we are learning from previous years and trying to make it better in any way we can. This is the display of last year in the atrium, so that you get an idea of how it looks. Yeah, so it's timetable 10 to 4. I am hoping that all your assessments are 10 to 1, but I cannot guarantee. That's why it has been timetabled, and it is in your timetable as 10 to 1 and 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, I'm not sure. My aim is to try to get all the year 3's assessments between 10 to 1, but I cannot promise at this time. Yeah.
Is 10 to 4 basically the window?
Yes.
Oh, so it depends on what window
Yes.
you want.
Now, it's also, yeah.
No, it's
Yes.
All about the audience of the poster format.
No. So the audience, the real audience, it's the two people that are marking it.
Okay.
That's the very, very narrow audience. So that's my next slide. It's like, yes, it's an end of degree celebration, but for you it's still an assessment. Okay, so the audience, think about the two people marking it. Okay, you can make it bigger. Think about the year 2 students, your peers here, the year 1 students. All of them should have a scientific background. You invite in your family and friends, that's not your audience. Yeah. External companies are also invited, so it's also a networking opportunity. I am hoping that I can get some of these external companies. Last year we got a couple of them to sponsor prizes. I am hoping that we can achieve that, but obviously that's beyond my control. So the prizes were like some vouchers from Amazon, so I'm hoping that happens. And if it happens, it will be decided by them, and it will be not linked to your assessment. It will be done by them using their own criteria. I shared the rubric with them, but they decide their own criteria. So it's a celebration, but it's also an assessment. So final details of the logistics will be announced via Canvas on the week before the assessment. You will be assigned a poster number and the start time. Usually it will be that if we start 10 to 1, so it could be that your start time is at 10, at 10:20, at 10:40, at 11. So you're more than welcome to be there for the whole session, but you must be next to your poster at your assigned time. Because if you are not next to your poster at the assigned time, then you get a 0 for criteria 3 and criteria 4, which is your presentation and your answer to the questions. The short presentation 5 minutes, the questions approximately 5 minutes. And this approx is to avoid issues with, not really answering the questions, not truly engaging with the questions, etc. And the markers are to academics not involved with your marking so far. So, 2 criteria assess your poster before that day, okay? They will be marking it on the day, but really, if you're not there, they will still mark it. If the poster is displayed, those 2 criteria will be used. One is the layout and design, and the other one is the content selection. The other 2, one is about your presentation, and the other one is about your responses. We'll talk more about those 2 criteria, the presentation and the responses, in the session we have in week 9, and we are going to focus on the other 2. And those are the 2 that you have been given a copy. Now, many of you are going to say, I cannot see them. If you cannot see and you wanna actually use the rubric, I would encourage you to come closer, because obviously I cannot make this bigger, okay? If you have a laptop and you wanna look at the slides on Canvas and then look it bigger, that's fine. But what I'm expecting now you to do is, I'm going to be timing each 2 minutes, give you a couple of minutes to discuss, look at your rubric that I just printed, look at these 2 documents, and think out of the 5 descriptions for each of the 2 criteria, in which boxes would you put this poster submitted by a student. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Okay, anybody wants to share thoughts? What about the layout and design?
I mean, I like the way it looks.
You you like the way it looks? Great.
There's a lot of text.
There is a lot of text. Yeah, we can agree on that. But look at the rubric. Do you think that it's a poster of a professional standard, very clearly structured, with excellent use of graphical elements and good balance between text and figures?
There's quite a lot of nice figures.
Or do you think that it's just well-designed poster with contents well organized, good use of graphical elements, all sections included, and sufficient information provided?
I'm known to be a horribly harsh person when it comes to things like that.
So here we got somebody who would give 5 marks out of 20 for the first criteria. Anybody any different? Just shout.
I'm mistaken between 8 and 42.
Between
Between good and
good and excellent. Yeah? Okay? Anybody else? Satisfactory. So the 2 markers that mark this poster for the layout agreed on excellent. One gave 14 marks and the other 17. So for me, I think it will be more for me, particularly in the good rather than excellent. So I will be close to 14. I think it will be a high good for me. I agree with the amount of text, and I agree that it's busy, but I think it ticks a lot of other boxes. And I think it's impossible on the day not to be biased by what you mark before or after. It's complicated, and that's part of what life is. I think it's a very good poster, and I wanted to start with this one because to make you realize how harsh you are usually marking. But yeah, that's my experience of doing that. In terms of content selection, obviously that you really need to look at. But if you look at the boxes, do you think that all the key information for you to understand this poster is here? Yeah? So again, both agree with very high marks. They gave 25 and 27 out of 30. So it was a really high mark poster. Maybe if you compare with this one, that so compare with this one, and do you think that this is better, worse? I'm going to give you 1 minute to look at it.
I feel like it's too boring. It's like I would do it's not iPad. It's not iPad. It's not got that. Wow. Do you know what I mean?
Do you remember one of the things that we said about the boxes being aligned or not aligned? Can you see figure 3 being on top of figure 1?
Oh, I've just seen that now.
Can you see figure 5 and figure 6 covering part of the figure?
I see that the labels are just like copy-pasted.
Can you see that the results box is slightly bigger than the introduction name?
It's too basic.
It's
I
basic.
wouldn't want to look at it. I would just like post it.
There's a good amount of information though, like it's not too
Yeah, but it's not iPad.
I'm just going to go with what the markers gave. So,
That's because preference
so this is a fine balance that you need to find between providing enough information and not writing enough. I think the problem here, rather than the fact that it has less information, less text, and that's good, it's the form what it's lacking. I think you look at this and it looks messy. Wouldn't you agree that it looks messy? It's like, yes, you put this yellow in the background, but I barely can see it, and I can see it more in some places and less in others. It's like the conclusion box, I cannot see the end of the conclusion box, but here I can see the end of the acknowledgement. It's like, it really looks messy. you know, why all this description here in the results, but there is no legend in any of the figures. So the figures need a legend, even if it's a tiny one. You know, they need a title. You need to be able to understand the figure. I cannot understand the figure without, you know, looking at this, but does that, you know, bacterial transformation for E. coli, is that the figure? The figure, it's just that enough to understand the figure? I don't know.
Very vague.
Yeah.
Also, the title is smaller than the title of each box.
Of each of the sections,
So
yeah.
the text is
Yeah.
bothering
Yeah. It is bothering you. Okay, so in this case, they went, both markers agreed on the satisfactory, a well-designed poster with correct structure, some deficiencies in formatting. So they get 9.5 and 10, each of the markers. And for the content selection, they were, again, in the satisfactory, but, sorry, in the below average, but in the top end of the below average. And they were talking about, you know, the lack of legends for the figures, the fact that the aim was not relevant. So obviously those are things that maybe you cannot see from the back end, but the fact that the aim was not relevant to the rest of the project. And the conclusions were not related to the figures. So be aware of those things, because if they should not comment on the quality of what you're presenting, because that's already been assessed. But what you are presenting here should be talking to each other. Or we're talking about the telling the story, that your aims need to be related to what you're presenting, and your conclusions need to summarize what you presented. So those things are important, okay? Next one.
There's a lot of boxes.
Lot of boxes.
Yeah, and I don't know where to start. Like I know I need to start from the beginning, but
I don't know when to start. I like that. So you can see how having a lot of text sometimes can be okay-ish if everything is well structured and the text says relevant things. But sometimes, if the figures are not good or not well presented or not well structured, and on top of that there is a lot of text, then it looks even worse.
they're really hard to see.
You cannot you cannot say it, but it's things that they comment is that there were different kind of fonts used.
Yeah.
It's hard to see from that far back, but it's not just that, and also some of the figures were pixeled, which they also mentioned, so be careful with that. Try to, when you are creating the poster, make the most quality picture possible. When you are converting it to the PDF, again, make it the most quality possible. So in this case, they were with, one of them went with poor, and the other one with below average. So yeah. I'm not answering that question, because if I say a number, then everybody will do that number, and it's not, and which number do I give? The one for the main text, one for the references, which can be smaller, that's correct. I mean, having this slightly smaller is okay, by slightly, so just don't make it like it's completely impossible to see. So there is no unique answer for that.
Also, the way they presented the results, I think it was using structure of the project. I don't know if it's because they only had choosing what they want to show as result. Maybe they should have chosen.
That's a good point. And look at this thing here, whatever that is. I mean, it's impossible to see.
Yeah.
And yes, some of the figures seem quite repetitive, but yeah, we don't know. We don't know the full information. Yeah.
There is two figure sixes.
Yeah.
It really hurts
Yeah.
to look I think it's the colours.
It's the color scheme. You know, the color scheme makes it so, you know,
It makes it easy to
it
see.
makes so easier to look at.
My eyes have just had like a mental break from the last one.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can read it.
But can you see that using the reference format, not with the format that we advise you to use, makes this box so much bigger than it needs to be? Yeah? So you can make this with, that could be only that space, yeah? And then you get more, and obviously the conclusions, I mean, I think about bullet points. Even if you don't put the bullet point, but think about the conclusions being bullet points. Because this paragraph, this is your text. It's a text that you know, and if you are asked, you can say and show off. But you don't need to put it all in there. So, the layout, it's,
The paragraphs, so you can actually visually break up where things change.
and can we see already that the methods, they try something different? I mean, it could be better, but they already tried a diagram that makes you look at the methods in a different way. One of the problems might be that they wanted to make the methods the same big, you know, as big as the introduction so that everything looked the same, and that makes you think at the poster as a whole, this first impression is like, I like it, but when you start looking in detail, you start seeing things that could have been better, if, you know. But yeah, so that received marks in the good and lower excellence. It was 13 and 15. So they went with the positives when marking the design and layout. And in the content selection, they were also quite high marks. So overall, the markers went with the positives and not going to the high end of those positives because of the text heavy. So both commented on the text heavy, but the good professional layout was more important when awarding the marks. What about this one?
I like different coloured box for the results. Something about it makes it emphasise the results in a different way.
Can we agree that everything that was good in the previous one, it's also
Better
present
in
here,
this one.
or is even better?
I personally think that
It's not
in
really
some cases
what
it's
too much
not
text.
a line of images like in a straight line.
Yeah, yeah,
Like that.
yeah. I think if you're struggling to find all these boxes the same size, maybe this helps, because they are not the same size, so putting one each maybe helps. But maybe they could have attempted to do it better. But, you know, we can see that they attended the lecture and they put, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, they put that. You can see that the methods are the best methods we've seen so far. Can we agree on that?
I love the pictures.
These, they probably missed that bit, all the references, but the conclusion, I mean, I like that it's short, but what I don't like is that it doesn't stand out. So maybe something in bold, or I don't know, something to make this stand out a bit. Or maybe making this slightly bigger, you know, something. Or do we really need the discussion? Probably that could go and maybe have this here slightly bigger. But I mean, it's great. And I'm not saying, you know, yes, it's still in the text heavy, but if you're going to have something wrong, I think having a bit more extra text, don't listen to me, maybe having a bit more text, it's not too bad. There are a lot of other things that you can do worse, okay? So if you are going to be penalized by something, so be it with the extra text, slightly, okay? So this is not a lot of text. This is a bit too much, but it's not too much if it's in the right thing. So I would scrap that box, make this bigger. This will be less text using the other format. Probably the figures, you don't need as much explanation. You can have one or the other. You know, you can have like the title of your figure should and the short description of the figure should provide enough information about your results. Maybe you don't need to put something else. And the introduction potentially could be shorter, but that depends on your project.
I don't like how small the text is. It feels like they could have made it bigger.
Yeah, too much text, but in this case, it's too much text and I don't have the positives that I had before. So look at how dull these materials and methods are. Great that the introduction is in bullet points, so again, I like that. But all these bullet points, you don't need them. Maybe it's because they didn't have more results, and yeah, but if you really don't have more results, just find a figure that talks about the introduction, just find a figure that gives the extra thing. So if you got less results, think about a figure for your introduction, think about a figure for your materials and methods. That gives a bit of color to your poster. So in this case, they went with marks around 12 out of 20. So still, one of the messages today is like you really need to do a bad poster to get really low marks. Okay? So, but that's because I designed this to benefit you guys. So really, to get into the pool, you need to be very poor. Okay? But to be in the high end or in the excellent, you really need to be excellent. So don't assume that because you're not going to get that if you do something decent, you are not necessarily going to be here. And what you want is to be here. Okay, guys, I want you to be here in the excellent bit. Sorry, I'm going. I think every year we run out of time, so I'm just talking a bit because otherwise. So good things about the references. That's slightly better, but it's like, come on, if you wanna, I mean, it's like it's so wide. I don't know. It's like it's clear, but I don't wanna read it. That makes sense. Yeah. It's nothing exciting, I'm afraid. Yeah, so, I mean, that will be again in the, just trying, I don't want to lie to you, I just want to tell you the marks. So, it got 11 out of 20 for, in average for the, so again, it's like, it ticks all the boxes, but, you know, with just a little bit more, they could have really gone up. And they criticize that there was too much content that was not there, that was needed. So be careful with that. And I'm going to move on to this one, just to end up with two contrasting ones.
Oh,
So
we don't like that one.
you don't like it. Yes.
I know because at the left
Please
text
don't do this. Okay? This is an example of what not to do. Okay? And yeah, so please don't do this. Please try to do this. I try to finish with a good one. You can see the methods here. A lot of methods explained just with diagrams. Can you see them? There's a lot. Okay, so we got cell proliferation, cell migration essays. We got the key references, well done. I mean, they didn't use the numbers, but what they did is, I'm not putting the new numbers there. I'm putting, so that could have been better. How they align the boxes could have been better, but the quality of the figures is great. I agree that if there are some things that are not needed, maybe you don't need to put them. Okay, so if this figure is saying that there is no difference whatsoever, maybe you don't need it. Yeah. But the colors are nice. They decided to make the introduction better or more appealing by putting this figure here with this scheme. They put the key message for each of the figures in bold. The conclusion could have been better because it's just nothing is highlighted, so it doesn't seem like a good conclusion. But can you see the contrasting difference? between what you should not aim for and what you know is your baseline of something that is excellent, can you make it even better? Okay? So the previous one